Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into another edition of Slo Ur Roll. I am Dominic Lorenzano, going solo today to talk about, well, it's going to be pretty much all football, and we're going to start with the biggest news of the football weekend, which was LSU's dismissal of Brian Kelly. We'll go into some of the NFL games that happened, including the Bears dropping that game to the Ravens. I'm going to talk about Caleb, and also, I mean, it's weird. I feel like everyone comes after John Harbaugh about there's always like a little span of time that it seems every 4 or 5 years, and then you realize, oh, he might be just really good at his job, and who else are you going to get? So I'll talk about that, probably a little bit about the Packers as well and what they did to the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, and why Gutekunst and LaFleur deserve so much more credit than they even get. And we'll talk about the Vikings as well after that embarrassing showing against the Chargers. But we will start with what was the biggest news of the weekend. Brian Kelly dismissed at the Louisiana State University. I have great contacts down there from when I worked for LSU. It's the one thing that I'm not just spewing my opinions or reactions to. I talk to people down there all the time. And my phone was blowing up as I was leaving a Halloween party on Saturday night as the third quarter was coming to a close. That major changes were going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to happen as soon as Sunday, but it kind of felt like it was over. And that was a stark turnaround because I had been told in very simple terms before that, after the Vanderbilt game, that the board, the boosters, had no appetite for a $54 million buyout, and the justification was pretty clear. You had lost on the road close to Ole Miss. You had lost on the road close to Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt, but like in this new age of college football, Diego Pavia's had 1 million starts. They're a top-ranked team. We know Vanderbilt's good at least this year. So you were losing close on the road. They were not happy, but no appetite for a $54 million buyout if that's what's happening. You lost 2 games close on the road. But that idea was shattered on Saturday night with what LSU brass and fans watched on in horror at what happened Saturday night as Texas A&M rolled in and kicked the ever-loving shit out of the Tigers. There's no other way to put it. And it made it very clear that one of 2 things was going on, and both of those 2 things are things that you cannot come back from, which was, one, the program in Brian Kelly's 4th year had fallen so far behind that they were actually more on par with the Vanderbilts of the world. And when a top-ranked SEC team came in, even if they were coming into your own house, they're going to physically dominate you because that's how far the program had fallen under Brian Kelly. Or the second thing is Brian Kelly had just lost the team, which I kind of feel like it's a little bit of both, probably more the second thing, but both of those things that you cannot come back from that. So there was no other way forward. This had to happen. It's just the way it had to be. But it's a crazy turnaround because, like I said, they had no intentions of doing this after the Vanderbilt game. They did not want this buyout. The other thing now is, and this is the kind of information you're not going to get from the national source, LSU has no president right now. The governor has inserted himself into a lot of these discussions. So the people who are going to spearhead this coaching search are going to be the governor of the state and the GM, Austin. Austin has a history of working with Lane Kiffin as well. So, Lane seems to not really want to leave Oxford, but LSU has that ace up their sleeve. I would suspect at this point, I expect one of these 3 people to be LSU's next coach, which is Lane Kiffin, Dan Lanning, or Joe Brady. Very early in the stages right now, though. It's very bumpy. The other thing, Scott Woodward, the AD, is going to have to go. He will be gone. It's clear of that. I mean, basically, Sunday, they held a closed-door meeting, all of the boosters, board members, with the governor, and Scott Woodward was not invited to that meeting. So And Scott Woodward and the governor have no love for each other. They absolutely hate each other. And the governor has been cleaning house at LSU anyway. So the AD will be out. They'll have to hire a new AD before they get a coach, likely. But maybe they won't. Maybe the governor and Austin Thomas, the GM, are just going to do the coaching search themselves. And then they'll just get a GM who falls in line with, they'll get a AD who is fine with who they hired. So that is what's going on right now for this job. Nick Saban's agent was already called, turned down. Saban's not going to return to coaching. So that's what's going on when it comes to behind the scenes, why this 180 happened so quickly, what the initial thing was beforehand, and then what's going to go on here further. To say what I want to say about the Brian Kelly tenure, Brian never, I think, cared about the state of Louisiana. I don't think he ever gave a shit. I think he was a mercenary. There were rumblings at the end of his time at Notre Dame that he actually was going to retire soon. I think he took the opportunity for a big paycheck and the opportunity to try and win a national title very quickly. And that is privy to the fact that, by the way, his teams were better early on his first couple of years, and then they got progressively worse. He beat Bama, I believe, the first year, I think it was, Nick Saban's Alabama. So he took over a roster that you could perceive to himself, he thought maybe I could win a national title in the first 1 or 2 seasons. But I don't think he was ever that dialed into the long term of this program. I think he was a complete mercenary who never gave a shit about the state of Louisiana and wanted to do everything his way. And I had said this in the college football preview to my brother Dan when he was on the show. I feel like he is now starting to do, or at least trying to do, some of the right things, bringing back Corey Raymond's, Blake Baker, but he had flushed Louisiana out of that building the minute he had gotten there. And the sort of icing on the cake was the strength and conditioning coach, Tommy Moffitt, who was part of multiple national championship teams. Multiple coaches, multiple national championship teams. Those big, bad LSU teams up front that you think about defensively, who went right with Nick Saban's Alabama, yeah, that was Tommy Moffitt's strength and conditioning coach work. And Brian Kelly fired him. And he was distraught. No one bled purple and gold like Tommy. And he goes to Texas A&M, and they beat the shit out of LSU last year, and then they basically just take their souls from him in the second half this year, just physically. And so I think that was the icing on the cake, Tommy Moffitt coming back. A&M players, after they won that game, picked up Tommy Moffitt and carried him partway on down the field. So this was a big deal for Tommy. It was a big deal for the players. He's great at his job, and it was very much not liked when he was fired, just like they didn't like when Corey Raymond was fired. And as I said, if you're going to flush Louisiana out of the building, well, then you better freaking win, and you better freaking win fast. And Brian Kelly didn't do it. So I think Brian was a mercenary. Now, Josh Pate, he said that this guy was on a beach during recruiting times. I think that's a bit over the top. I don't think he was that checked out. But he was checked out at the end. I think the team quit on him. And the other thing, the optics too. You're yelling at Joe Salone over the freaking headset during the game, and it's like, Brian, you're the CEO coach. Like, every play call that comes through there comes through your headset. Like, you can go on there and tell Joe or the special teams coach, we're not kicking it to that guy. Or, Joe, you can't run a pass in the flat when we have no timeouts near the end of a half. Like Brian, you can step in and not allow that to happen. Brian Kelly was simply looking for a scapegoat, and he knew the cameras would be on him, and he made sure that you could literally hear the easiest lip reading of all time as he's just jumping down his assistant coach's throat on the sideline. Terrible look, but that was a man who I think knew he was in trouble, and then halfway through the third quarter was probably knowing that I need to throw somebody else under the bus, but it did not work. Brian is the one who was thrown under the bus. With that, Frank Wilson is going to be the interim coach. I love it. Whatever passion that you lacked with Brian Kelly, you're at least going to get it with Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson loves LSU football. Frank's going to do everything in his power to try and make sure the team does not quit on the rest of the season and try to make sure that he can do everything within his power to keep the recruiting class that's supposed to be coming in intact and make sure that they're seeing a product on the field that they can believe can be good right away for whatever coach then steps in. So I love that Frank Wilson is going to take over as interim head coach for LSU, because he will at least bring a level of passion and simply just caring that I think was gone from Brian Kelly pretty early on in this season, and pretty early after the Ole Miss loss, and definitely just over after the Vanderbilt loss. That this is what happens when you hire mercenaries. And again, I'm not saying Brian Kelly's a terrible coach. I think he was on his way out. He's 65 years old. He had no Southern ties. I don't think he gave a shit. I think he was there for Brian, and that's it. So that is that on that. Quickly, the job itself, Joe Klatt said he believes it's a top 3 job in college football. It's definitely inarguably a top 5 job. The fact that Florida is even trying to say that they're anywhere close to that is laughable. With Florida being open, Penn State being opened, and all the other ones that'll be open, obviously not even close. I don't really think you're going to see anybody hired at those other jobs, particularly at Florida, until LSU fills this position, because this is still one of the premier jobs in all of college football. You literally are completely unchallenged as the king of your state in what is a top 5, maybe even top 3 recruiting grounds in the entire country in Louisiana. You know, Georgia has Georgia Tech. Not that they're that much of a competition, but they also have Florida right at the doorstep. Now, Georgia's still a great job. Georgia's probably just as good a job as LSU, because they have more recruits even at Georgia. But everybody else has some sort of competition usually within the state. Louisiana has none. It's just LSU. You know, Texas has multiple schools. Florida has Florida State, Florida, and Miami. And you know, I don't think it's possible for the 3 programs in Florida, Florida State, Florida, and Miami. I don't think it's possible for more than one of them to be flourishing at a time. I don't think it'd even be 2. It could maybe be 2 if Georgia was down, but Georgia's not down, and Kirby's right at your doorstep, and Kirby's going to go in and pluck recruits out of Florida. Like, it's Kirby Smart, it's Georgia, they've won multiple national titles. It's right on your doorstep if you're in northern Florida. You know, do you feel in northern Florida, right? I don't think there's culturally a massive difference between Georgia and the northernmost areas of Florida. I don't think they have the same identity as they do down in Miami and South Florida and all that kind of stuff. So I just think it's not hard for those kids to just say, I'm going to go play for Kirby Smart. So that's why I don't think Florida is that great of a job. And I think LSU is here and Florida is here, and it's not me being a homer. I mean, Joe Klatt didn't play for LSU. Like, he didn't even play in the SEC. And yet he says he believes it's a top 3 job in all college football. And inarguably, it's a top 5. No one has not said that. So that's where you are now in relation to this job opening to now with all the other ones that are going down. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I believe even with the buyout, the governor is going to do his very best to go big game hunting, because let's be honest, if he's the guy who's known as helping out to land Lane Kiffin or Dan Lanning to come to LSU, it's not bad for his political career. That's just the simple reality of it. You want to be governor of Louisiana, like, I spearheaded LSU getting Lane Kiffin. It's not bad for your political career. That's the way things run down there. And I think it's hard sometimes for some people up here to realize that, because they never think of things in those terms. But if the governor is in charge of part of the coaching search right now, they're going to go big game hunting, because it's sensational for his political career. So those are my thoughts on LSU. Moving on to some football talk. Let's start with the Bears and the Ravens. Now, I hate John Harbaugh as a gambler because he made it seem like Lamar was going to play all week and then he didn't, and I had to cash out my bet. I should have let it ride, especially when I heard it was Taylor Huntley. But listen, all this talk about, is it John Harbaugh's fault? Does John need to go? Crazy talk. Not only were it was like, well, Kyle Shanahan is able to win with some backup quarterbacks. And yes, but like the Ravens were also down, I don't know, almost their entire defense. And, Taylor Huntley was a little banged up even too. So they had Cooper Rush, but they've built an offense more for what Taylor Huntley does than what a normal backup quarterback like Cooper Rush would do. So it's not built for a guy like Cooper Rush to come in and have success. And the other thing is, like, let's just be honest too. Like, Baltimore was playing a first place schedule. Like, they played Kansas City, they played Detroit, they played Buffalo, and they had to play the Rams and the Texans, which, say what you want about the Texans, their defense is absolutely awesome though. And, as everyone is trying to sit here and say, well, Kyle wins with a backup. Well, the Houston Texans just whooped his ass with a backup because Houston is a top-tier defense. So when John and Kyle this season had the same opponent and they were both playing backup quarterbacks, they both lost. And they both lost kind of handedly. That, like, the 26-15 score does not indicate the way that game played out. Houston whooped up on San Francisco. It should have been more. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is, again, the last three opponents the Ravens had to play with backups. Except the Kansas City game, Lamar played some of that, but they never beat Kansas City. Kansas City, Houston, Rams. All three of those were playoff teams. So, like, it's an unfair ask, even without all of the defensive injuries that they had, to be asking John Harbaugh that you should be winning some of these games with a backup quarterback. That's just tough. And what happened? They played the Chicago Bears with a backup, and Chicago's not any of these teams, and they whooped them. Then they really did. But that brings up the other issue, which I talked about to start the year, which is I always thought this was going to be an extremely weird marriage between Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. And Ben has that team playing better everywhere else. The running backs are playing well. The defense is playing well. We always know that they have pass catchers. Their special teams is even better than it was last year. But, like, Caleb remains, to me, kind of a mess. And his stats are probably better than last year's because it's not a total train wreck. And he's great on the script. All the plays that Ben has drawn up and they've practiced all week long. But a lot of teams can be good on the script. That doesn't mean anything. And the minute they get off script, second, third, and fourth quarter, their point differential is in the minuses. His completion percentage is, I believe, 56, 57%. And you saw it all Sunday. How many times did he throw passes to guys in the flat and they had to actually stop their momentum to make the catch? That's not acceptable, especially in a Ben Johnson type of offense that relies on yards after catch, getting the ball in space to playmakers, hitting them in stride, and letting them do things afterwards with the football. But if they keep having to stop on these short routes, and it's not like these are long routes, these are just in the flat 4 or 5 yard passes, and Caleb is just not leading the wide receiver at all. And that's just, he's an NFL quarterback. You got to be more accurate than that. It's not even just about the completions. Are you allowing your player to be able to do something afterwards? And if Caleb's going to continue to be this inaccurate, he doesn't allow that. And that is just a basic concept of the Ben Johnson offense. This marriage, to me, is never going to last. Now, I don't know how long. They like Tyson Bagent. And if they keep squeaking out and winning most of these games when they're not playing teams like the Ravens, obviously Caleb's going to still be playing. But I do not think that this is a long-term thing. I don't think it's going to be Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams together for the Bears for the next 7 or 8 seasons. I wouldn't be shocked if it's not even next season, unless something seriously changes. Because this is a guy who cut his teeth in the NFL now and made all his success with Jared Goff. who is not an athlete at all, who cannot outrun anybody. But you know what he does? He sits back in the pocket. He does what he's told. He does everything in timing and rhythm, and he's very accurate on the things, on the layups. He's extremely accurate, and Caleb is all of the opposites of those. Big, strong arm, no rhythm. There's just no tempo to his game at all. Way too much freelancing, running out of the pocket even when he doesn't need to. So the marriage is exactly as bumpy as I always kind of thought it was going to be between these two, because they're just not, stylistically, they're just completely different. So another NFL thing before we take a quick break is I want to talk about the Sunday night football game with the Packers and the Steelers. And it will lead into what we talk about after the break, is like what the Vikings did. The Packers, I think, deserve so much credit for the way they draft and develop, the way they handle the quarterback position, and the patience that they have. They draft Jordan Love. It's nothing but outcry when they do it. What are you doing? You got to use that pick for Aaron Rodgers in this team. And then they sit Jordan Love for like 3 seasons, only show him occasionally, and I'm sure it was very bumpy early on. And then they have the balls to finally at the end tell Aaron to hit the road and just go with the kid they drafted a couple of years ago, who has barely played any games at this point and has sat for this long. He's at a Utah State. You know, sometimes in the action that he did see when Aaron wasn't available, he didn't always look great. But they had the guts to say, you know what, we think Aaron is a declining player. We believe in everything that we have taught, all that we have been teaching Jordan, the developmental, everything that we have done to develop this player now over the next couple of years. We have the confidence that we know what we're doing, and we're going to let Aaron go. And it could have backfired horribly. It would have been far safer for them to just give Aaron another 1 or 2 seasons. And if it had gone wrong, I think everyone would have been pointing the finger at Aaron. They were like, well, Aaron fell off the cliff. He's old. But if Jordan failed, obviously they're going to be pointing at Matt LaFleur and Gutekunst. So the Packers, for the way they do things, this is why this franchise is never really bad. And this is why other franchises, like the Jets, are never good. Because they draft a quarterback, have nothing around him, ask the kid to be the savior, ruin him, fire the coach, fire this guy, never any stability in the building, never any long-term development, no patience. And that's why the Panthers are what they are, although they're getting a little bit better. But that's why the Jets are what they are. The Browns are what they are. You know, all these teams, these dumpster fires in the NFL. And that's why the Packers are the gold standard. And they just seem to never whiff on a quarterback. Partly because, like I said, they're very patient with it. So congrats to more credit to LaFleur and Gutekunst, because they deserve it so much. For the Steelers, I don't know. I don't know what to think. It kind of feels like they're going to get luckier this year than they have been in past years, because the Ravens were decimated by injuries. So they were like 1-4, 1-5, whatever it was before they won on Sunday. The Bengals lost Joe Burrow for the season, and the Browns are just a joke. So they're probably still going to win this division, but this team feels like no different than the last 2 or 3 teams. Like, they're going to win 9-10 games. They're probably going to lose pretty convincingly in the first round of the playoffs. The defense is worse now. You know, they gave all that money to TJ Watt. That's looking bad. They probably should have traded him for some picks and free up some money elsewhere. You know, the Metcalf thing, I think, did work out. Jalen Ramsey, the secondary doesn't seem like it's capable of covering anybody. The Steelers are exactly what they've always been. Luckily, the AFC is not as good as it has been in years past, although the Chiefs look like they're fully back. But, you know, Tomlin, Pittsburgh, it's more of the same to me. So, all right, with that, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some more NFL talk, so stick with us, guys. And we are back at Slow Your Roll, moving on to the Vikings. who get absolutely trounced by a Chargers team that was not playing well until that game, is also banged up. I'm not here to shit on Kevin O'Connell. I don't know if he made the decision or if somebody else did. One of the things I always think is funny is all these media pundits, and like I feel like Cowherd is the biggest one, that the public rips on them because they're like, well, you flip-flop your opinions. And it's like, no, I can have an opinion a couple of weeks ago and then I'm presented with new information that can change my mind. Like you react and have an opinion based on the info that you have. If you get radically new information, like it seems pretty logical to then sometimes change your opinion on stuff. Like you would want your pilot to change his opinion if he got new data about the weather on his flight path to wherever you're going, you know? Do doctors do the same things they did 10 years ago as they do today? Probably not. Are some of their opinions on stuff a little different? They definitely are, because you're presented with new information. And so the Vikings originally brought in Sam Darnold to be a bridge quarterback if JJ wasn't ready right away, and then JJ got hurt after they drafted him. But then he threw 30-plus touchdowns, and they won 13 or 14 games. And I know the last 2 games were ugly, but the 2-game sample size shouldn't be bigger than what you saw all season long. And JJ was the 5th quarterback taken in that draft. Or 4th. Was he 4th? Trying to think. Bo, Penix, May, Dan. Yeah, he was the 5th. He was the 5th quarterback taken in that draft. So let's not act like he was some number 1 or 2 overall pick and some huge stud. He played on a great roster in college. They didn't ask him to throw a ton. So, and you had already seen, like, all right, Drake looks like he's going to work. Jaden looks like he's working. Bo Nix works to some degree. So, like, by the law of averages, somebody's got to be a bust in this draft. And maybe it's going to be Penix. Maybe it's going to be Caleb. But the Vikings should have thought to themselves, maybe it's going to be JJ. And that should have been an honest conversation. And the funny thing about this, too, is if you stripped everything away that happened to Darnold with the Jets and the Panthers, who, again, I mean, Baker Mayfield, until last week, was maybe the MVP of the league. He didn't have a lot of success with the Browns. Like, if you're one of these bottom-tier franchises, like, just because you fail there doesn't mean it's all on you. It's just like the Jets fail people. The Browns fail players all the time. But the funny thing is, like, if you were to strip all that away, if you were to make JJ and Sam the same age and say they were coming out of college at the same time, Sam would be the better prospect. Sam's bigger, stronger, bigger arm. Like, Sam was the first quarterback taken in his draft years ago out of USC. So I think they got trapped by their own thinking, that they just felt that they had to do this because they had drafted and spent the pick on JJ, which you didn't have to. Like, you could have traded JJ and still gotten something back. Maybe you wouldn't have gotten a first-round pick because people around the league would have been like, well, why aren't you just going with McCarthy instead of Darnold? But at the same time, maybe the league would have just said, well, Sam threw 34 freaking passes. So, but they didn't. And I also think they let the media and the hatred towards Sam Darnold and that narrative be built after the 2 games at the end of the year that he played poorly and got him out of position to win the division and then bumped him out of the playoffs. Now, I think the second game was not all on Sam. I thought O'Connell called a terrible game as well. And it turns out that Rams team is the only team that nearly beat the Eagles, so losing to them is not the worst thing in the world. But I think they just got trapped. I think they felt obligated to roll with JJ just because they had spent the pick on him. And what they should have done is realize that they had been given new information about the player that they had gotten, Sam Darnold, and they should have changed their decision based on that new information. But they didn't do that. And now they're kind of screwed. I mean, you're sitting here with this roster. It really, no one thinks the head coach is bad. Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. We think he might have the best DC in Brian Flores. We think the personnel on defense is good enough. We know the offense is loaded between Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, I mean, that's like the best 1-2 combo you could possibly have. The tight end ain't bad. They find ways to run the football. Aaron Jones is pretty good pass catching back. So, like, the roster, we like the head coach, the DC, the roster. But they're so bad at quarterback right now and like, there's no way out unless they're going to go back into the free agent pool, just give up on McCarthy, and just hope you find the next Sam Darnold, which good luck with that. And Darnold's lighting it up in Seattle. And I love their head coach. They have some decent personnel, but you can't say he's playing with better offensive personnel in Seattle than he was playing with in Minnesota. Like, he's definitely not, and he's still doing great. And they're in position, they're in a position right now they could win that division. I laid some money on them the start of the year to win that division. I love it. I'm loving what I see from the Seahawks. I think they'll blow out Washington this upcoming week because they're coming off a bye. Washington's defense is really bad. Even if Jaden's back, like, the magic from last year is just gone. The Commanders were way ahead of schedule. The roster's not that good. But the Vikings, man, they got trapped. They got trapped by feeling obligated to the decisions that they had made earlier. And even though they were presented with new information, they decided to do nothing about it. So that's where the Vikings are at. And I mean, it's a pretty hopeless situation at this point. Finally, I did want to end with, actually, we'll talk quickly on the Pats. I mean, they stomp out the Browns. It was a little ugly early. Cleveland's defense can do that to you. Drake May looks so legit. It's amazing how much better you can be the minute you get a real head coach like Mike Vrabel. I mean, look at Tennessee since Vrabel left. His last year there wasn't good, but they weren't the worst team in the league. And now the Titans are a joke. The Titans are the worst team in the league, it seems like 2 straight years. I mean, that team is pitiful. If you told me they don't win a game this year, I would... if you told me they don't win another game all year, I would totally believe it. Because they suck. They suck everywhere. There's nothing redeeming about that team at all. And so the place has gone up in flames ever since Vrabel left. And the Pats had the 3rd overall pick last year. And now they're in a position they could win their division, especially with how crummy the schedule is. And Drake, who was looked at as a very good prospect, but pretty raw coming out of college, has looked like he has arrived the last couple of weeks. And I'm someone who's usually very hesitant about anointing guys, particularly if it's locally. But I mean, there's not much right now that he does that you can't be impressed by. He moves around in the pocket well, but keeps his eyes downfield to make plays. He throws the ball downfield. It's not just like, the knock on Bo. It's a lot of schemed up stuff by Sean. And the minute they faced a good defense, he's not able to do it. Well, they faced a pretty damn good defense on Sunday. Now, it helps that the Browns' offense is incompetent, so it kind of wears out the defenses on the field. But, like, the Browns have shut down multiple teams this season with that defensive front and that defense that they play. And Drake took him a bit, took him a half, but he exploited it in the end. And they put up a bunch of points again, and they won easily. In a matchup, in a spot, too, that felt like it could have been a little bit of a bad spot for the Pats, and it didn't matter in the end. So I think Drake's arrived. He keeps playing like this. He might be in that top 10 discussion by the end of the year. He's already that good. And he certainly has the physical traits and characteristics to make him a special player. I mean, he's big, strong, athletic with a rocket arm. I mean, he's kind of more like a mini Justin Herbert, I would say, because Josh is truly, I believe, a one-of-one athletically and as a physical specimen, but definitely some Justin Herbert comps from what Drake May is at this point. So, and speaking of that prototype of quarterback, Tua and the Dolphins, Kyler and the Cardinals. Now, I defended the Kyler one a little bit because he is at least a gifted athlete. I didn't love it, but I at least said I understand some of it. The Tua one I never understood, and I don't know if there's ever been a contract other than maybe Brandon Ayuk's with the Niners that anyone's regretted this fast. And I keep waiting for it. When Jesse was here, we would talk about it all the time, quarterback inflation. I'm waiting for this bubble to burst. Maybe this is it, because these were the two most suspect quarterback contracts that were given out as rookie deals were ending. Brock Purdy's another one, although he's just been banged up over the last couple of years, and both are looking like mega disasters. Tua's probably being the biggest one of all. You're just never going to win with a player like that. And you can manage around it when you're not paying him a bunch of money, but once you start paying him $40 million, well, the roster is not going to be as good, and he is the definition of a trailer, like someone that has to be pulled by the team. He will never be pulling that team, and I don't even think he even sits in the truck bed and at least is along for the ride. I think he has to be pulled. Kyler, size, I don't think he particularly sees the field all that well sometimes down the field. I mean, he has a lot of the physical characteristics you like, but it seems like the Cardinals' offense is functioning more with Jacoby Brissett than with Kyler Murray. So, and I think, I think Gannon's kind of done with him. They paid him all this money. This really hasn't changed. The Kyler Murray experience has stayed the same. It's extremely inconsistent. It's very up and down. If there is a game that he is the favorite in that they should win, they're probably going to lose it a lot. And yes, when they face really good teams and they're a dog, Kyler has a tendency, because of his athletic ability, he'll just make some plays and he can pull off an upset or keep you in a game. But to consistently win in the NFL, you have to do a lot of the boring stuff right. He doesn't really do it. I think part of it is because he's limited by his size. He has hard times literally seeing in the pocket down the field. So there's just limitations there. Tua's just limited by what he can and cannot do physically. And I think, he tries to speak up and be a leader on that team, but when you're throwing back-to-back games of 4 interceptions, then it's hard to be the vocal leader. And by the way, I'm saying this after they curb stomped Atlanta, which Atlanta has all sorts of problems. I mean, we want to shit on Bill Belichick and everything, but I don't think Atlanta exactly made the right decision 2 years ago when they hired Raheem Morris over Bill. And Raheem was arrogant enough to say that he had one of the biggest staffs because he planned on winning right away, and so he needed guys in place when his assistants got poached. Well, he's not winning at all. And he's got the Saints and the Panthers in his division, and he's still not winning at all. And he got curb stomped by Carolina, and he got curb stomped by the Miami Dolphins. And he got curb stomped at home. And I know he had Kirk Cousins play the backup, but they're paying Kirk $30-something million. You should be better than that. He's essentially been curb stomped by 2 really bad teams. Now, Carolina, I believe, has a decent record, but Carolina has also been blown out twice. And the Miami one is just, Miami's a bottom 4 team right now. So the major problems with the Falcons. But back to the contract stuff. I don't know when the bubble's going to burst. It's got to happen soon. The Lawrence one, they are winning some, although that came to an end against the Rams in London. But especially when we have Sam Darnold resurrect his career last year, and then we have another one in Daniel Jones resurrecting his career, and he's got the Colts humming, so they could have a number 1 or 2 seed in the AFC. So, you have the history now of the Kyler and Tua stuff, Tua being the gold standard of you can't pay someone with this many question marks who's this average. Just because they win a lot of meaningless games in September and October and early November in Miami when the weather's good and with a very great offensive coach that can scheme it open. Tua never beat winning teams. I think the only winning, that 2-year span that the Dolphins went on then when they were pretty good, I would say they were a better watch. They were sexier than what the substance was, how great they were, but they were flashy. If they faced a bad team, they could put up 1,000,000 points with their speed, with their offensive scheming. But even on the best run that he had in the peak of Tyreek and Waddle and Mike McDaniel before the league had more film on his offense, Tua still wasn't beating good teams. I think the only playoff team he beat was the Dallas Cowboys once. And part of that was because the Cowboys fumbled at the goal line. So they basically handed them an extra 7 points. And Miami still almost lost. So it was the most egregious of all of them. And I'm trying to think the kind of contracts. But, like, I mean, Caleb's not getting a deal. I don't know. Just the bubble's got to burst on this soon. And we're going to have Darnold resurrect his career. Danny resurrect his career on new organizations, back-to-back seasons. I think it's becoming clear there is an alternative to when the quarterback says, I want a contract extension, and you're in the building like, does he deserve one? I mean, the Seahawks told Geno Smith to go kick rocks, and that's been the best offseason decision probably that anyone's made because he looks terrible right now. So I'm waiting for the bubble to burst. I don't know when it will, but anyway. So that has been it, though, for Slow Your Roll this week. The LSU is a major developing story. I will continue to talk to people. It's going to be a while. It's going to take some time because they're going to have to figure out everything they're going to do. They still haven't come to an agreement on Kelly's buyout, exactly how long the payments are going to be. If he gets a media job, should they not owe him as much money? They're still trying to negotiate that part. So that part's not even done yet. Throw in the fact that the AD, Scott Woodward's going to be out of a job soon. So there's a lot of moving parts there. But with that, have a great rest of your week, though, ladies and gentlemen.